Thank you. Thanks, Sultana. Hi, everybody. It's really, really good to be here. And thanks so much, Jill. It's so good to meet you.
And can I check, Jojo, that you can see me and hear me?
I can see you. I'm going to have to try and turn around. Don't know where the fire is, by the way, Jill.
Sorry.
I'm going to have to sort of turn around to see you, but I can see you over there as well. But anyone that can't see me on the precarious microphone, please or can't hear me, please put your hands up. But Jill, I wanted to thank you, first of all, for enabling and being part of the team that enabled this. And it's really great to be able to chat to you. Now, I don't know whether you can see, Jill, we've got a whole room of girls and young women here that are really keen to hear what you personally have to say. But I'd really just like to set the scene for them first, before we talk about Jill, the girl, becoming Jill, the trailblazing lawyer, as you've been described. So what we're looking at that's sort of really interesting and relevant to us today is some of the sexual violence cases that you pursue, and that the human rights element of that. So Jill takes cases on behalf of women who have been abused by people like Harvey Weinstein. I understand there was talks about possibly Kevin Spacey and Jeffrey Epstein. But Jill, just tell us, first of all, what is so significant about you as a civil lawyer taking a case? Because some people might think that's a bit unusual, that you would expect that the police would be prosecuting cases like that. So can you set the scene on that type of work and why it comes about that you're doing that?
Yeah, I have to fess up here. I'm not a human rights lawyer. I'm a personal injury lawyer. So,
yes.
I listened into some of the last session and was really impressed by what everyone was saying. So, and thank you for inviting me to talk at this event. It's such a good event to be at. So I'm really sorry I can't be there, but I'm in the 8th week of a 3-week inquest it was meant to be. And my jury literally went out this morning. So I had to catch a train up to Manchester this morning. But the reason why I do this work, I suppose, actually, it goes back to some quite fundamental beliefs that I hold about not being prepared to watch things happen around me. And if I've got the skills as a lawyer to help people, then I'm able to do that. Then I use litigation, because I'm a personal injury lawyer, to assist people in challenging those individuals, and whereby you would hope that the criminal process will kick in and will lead to successful prosecutions. That often doesn't happen, I'm afraid. You know, the one case where it did happen, and I was really pleased to be involved in, was Harvey Weinstein. And actually, we, the civil lawyers, worked with the NYPD in New York and the DA's office and the Attorney General's office in New York. And actually, that was a really good example of civil lawyers working with the criminal processes and making sure that the information did come out. But so often, the kind of time that I'm able to spend on a case investigating, putting that case together and seeking damages for my client just isn't always available in the criminal process, unfortunately. And it's a problem, isn't it, really? Because frankly, I can only ever really get damages. I can shine a light on things, but I can't put people in prison. And you really want people to be put in prison when they've done these kind of things.
Well, it's quite incredible, because when you look at the statistics, it's reckoned, according to the rape crisis in the UK alone, 1 in 4 women are subject of rape or sexual abuse, 1 in 6 children, and actually 1 in 18 men. And probably only about 2% of those of perpetrators are ever charged. So is it easier in some ways to get a conviction in civil court? And if so, what can you hope to achieve?
So the 2 things to bear in mind through the civil courts, actually, for a personal injury claim for sexual assault, is that first of all, you can pursue someone through the civil courts, but you have to be sure they've got some financial wealth behind them, I'm afraid, and very many perpetrators of these assaults don't. So in fact, I suppose what I'm doing is making sure that the ones where they do have wealth, we're able to highlight that, actually. The second aspect to it is that there's a different burden of proof, so it's balance of probabilities as opposed to beyond all reasonable doubt. So in fact, in terms of the test itself, it is a lower test in the civil courts, which is helpful to victims potentially. Although having said that, you either believe them or you don't. And so in fact, the test is there and is helpful. And the civil route is not an easy route at all. It is challenging. It's individuals taking on the individual themselves. I'm in direct contact with their lawyers and sometimes with the individual as well. And you know, to actually take that on as a victim is a massive thing. And I'm always like really honoured when people ask me to help them with these things, because I know that they have paid a very heavy price, and quite often they're talking to me for the first time and haven't spoken to anyone about what happened to them 30 years ago. So so it's not an easy route. It does have some benefits, but the reality that the vast majority of victims of sexual assault, it's just not realistic, actually. So as I go back to the point, shining a light on the ones where you can actually shine a light, I think that then has an impact. I think Harvey Weinstein's a good example. It led to the Me Too movement. It's now led to various things that I'm doing with the film and TV industry. And I think you can make a difference by doing this kind of work. But and you as a lawyer really put your neck on the line as well, I'm afraid, because if you've got a high-profile defendant, they will use the press to actually not be terribly helpful to you or your client as well. So it's a two-way thing. This actually, it's not easy.
So it's an interesting one, because when I was working in litigation in employment law, often it was the really, really big cases, the one big banker's case or whatever, that would then set precedents and encourage others to come out. And I suppose you found the same with the Harvey Weinstein. It has shed that light. But how would you bring that back then into this room to encourage people to think that, you know, there's such a commonality with these cases? It's, you know, it's all very well saying that there's the Harvey and the people that can do that and be in the press for it. But given that sexual assault and girls' human rights are violated on a regular basis, how do we bring that back into the room to say, well, actually, we can all speak up, we can all do something about this in a small way?
I think it is. It's the platform, isn't it? So, and I think the film and TV industry is a really good example of how this is given a platform using the Weinstein case. So now what we're doing in that industry is setting up a regulatory authority that will help all freelancers in that industry to make complaints and to have their complaint of harassment investigated. And that will include sexual harassment. And so I think, so that will not simply be in relation to anyone who's high profile. It's just simply in that industry. In that industry, I'm afraid, I probably get a call from someone in that industry on an almost weekly basis. And so you can see how using the platform to shine a light on the abuse, but then also recognizing that is merely sort of the tip of the iceberg, using that to actually impact the regulatory aspects, and also I think to shine a light on the lack of criminal process. So, you know, there are some fantastic prosecutions that go ahead, but we've seen the stats. We all know how difficult it is. And, you know, I just wonder if, in fact, by using the cases that are in the press and people know about, you think, well, actually, why have we not got a better process in place? I mean, the DA's office in New York was really interesting, because, in the Attorney General, because they were in part investigating the case themselves. So there was no kind of handing over from the police to the CPS and all the rest of it. It was actually a much more cohesive process. And I thought that process worked really well. You won't get that everywhere, but I think it's about not just thinking about the case itself. There's lots of cases that I do have gone nowhere near the press, and you wouldn't know who I'm talking about at all. But it's using it, I think, and the regulatory framework, I think, is really interesting, because so often people don't have anyone they can complain to or to help them complain to, actually. So if you have a regulatory framework and you have a complaints process where you have independent panels set up to investigate these things, they will investigate, they will make findings. And that will then almost self-regulate that industry. And we're talking to the music industry as well. We're talking about taking this internationally. So, you know, there's a lot, I think, that you can do, but I get it. It's really difficult. And I think the point is to keep on fighting and to keep on highlighting it as an issue. I think that otherwise it gets swept under the carpet a bit and people don't really think about it as much as they absolutely need to.
And is that why you think so many women take so long to speak up? I mean, you mentioned there just a while ago that some of these are 30 years later. And I think the press takes hold of that and say, well, why didn't she speak out at the time? So what is it that stops women?
Terror, usually. I mean, you know, there's a special exception in the personal injury law, actually, which Section 33 of the Limitation Act, which everyone in they'll probably know about, which is an ability to bring a claim many years after the event, even though there's a 3-year limitation period in personal injury claims. And there's a good reason for that, because very often the victims are so terrorized into not being able to speak and not being able to challenge and can't process what actually happened to them. The very fear of that perpetrator is what silences them. And the person who silences them, the perpetrator, should not have the benefit of that fear in the personal injury setting. So I see, you know, clients who just have not been able to admit to their partners, to their family, to their friends. Actually, they've usually spoken to one person. It's quite interesting. There's normally somebody who knows around them. It's, you know, but not always. And I think it is real fear, actually. I mean, interesting with the Jeffrey Epstein case, the fear that the victims had, even though he was dead, was extraordinary, actually, because they felt he had such connections. And so you think everyone is, and when someone's had that, they're put in a really weak position. It's the ultimate sort of like transgression that you can have as a woman. And who's going to believe you? You know, that's the other thing. Who's actually going to believe you that it happened in the way it is? Because very often there's no witnesses, it's behind closed doors. And, you know, if there's a dynamic of power, that's really difficult to challenge. So, you know, I think there's all sorts of different scenarios, but the fear, the dynamics, the not being believed, just an ability to process the reality of what's happened to them breeds silence, unfortunately.
So it's so interesting that you talk about power and the power play here. And I think probably everybody can understand with Harvey Weinstein and famous people like that, especially when they hold your career in the balance. If you're trying to get a part in a movie or something, you can understand, well, that is power. And of course, we come across a lot of that at work as well. The work in the workplace, and you've got a very senior person. But that doesn't necessarily, does it, explain all of the sexual assault and the girls that are possibly afraid to speak up when this sort of assault or groping or whatever it is takes place on a Saturday night at a nightclub or takes place in other places. So is there any commonalities, any similarities between that fear of speaking up?
I think there is still a huge amount of fear that people won't be believed, actually, and then people know. The problem is that, you know, if you go to the police, actually, it's interesting how, I mean, quite often I act as a conduit. I literally introduce people to the appropriate police force and things and make sure that they're being looked after, because I've had people who've gone to the police and just have not been acknowledged or dealt with appropriately at all, actually. So, and the problem is people hear about these stories and hear about how the police ignored them and how they didn't get a proper investigation or they weren't believed. And there's a real fear that you challenge someone, they push back, and suddenly you end up as the victim being the one who is being questioned in a way. It's almost like you know, the re-traumatizing of victims is a very real thing in the criminal process. And, you know, who wants to go through sort of years of criminal process, end up in a trial where they've been accused of lying over a sexual assault? I think it's a really difficult thing to have to deal with for individuals. So I think fear and the fear of not being believed is something that runs through a lot of these cases, actually. No matter where you are in society, it is a real issue.
And so the really peculiar thing about the Harvey Weinstein case, according to the press, is that so many other people knew about it. So many people turned a blind eye, and which brings us back to the power, I suppose, of the bystander and of other people speaking up. Is there? I mean, have you come across how situations where it can be really useful, where you can either encourage people to speak up, people that are not actually the victims, or is that something that there's an art to?
I didn't
And
quite catch the end bit of that question. I'm so sorry.
sorry, I'm talking about people that understood, other people know that this is going on and stay quiet about it. And I'm just trying to understand and convey the power of the bystander, the power of somebody else speaking up, and that as part of your role to get witnesses or to get other people to come forward to back that up. Is that something
You would hope so, wouldn't you? I mean, I'm going to sound really depressing now, I'm afraid. I mean, I'm dealing with I've dealt with quite a few law firms where I've been dealing with these kind of issues, actually. And, you know, where there certainly are people who've known about what has happened. And actually, they become really fearful. It becomes almost a circle of fear, really. So you would absolutely want to encourage people to whistleblow and to call people out. And I think society as a whole has got much better at calling people out and at expressing sort of their views very clearly. But I still go back, I'm afraid, to the dynamics of power, and that if you are someone very senior in an organization and you have been sexually harassing or have assaulted a junior person in it, it is amazing how you know, it is difficult to get the people around to acknowledge that actually happened, because again, it's one-on-one. I mean, what I do see more of, which is a really welcome thing, is when these allegations are raised, that organisations are now launching their own internal inquiries using external people. So I think that's a really important movement. That used to be they do their own internal investigation. I think they've realised actually getting external people in gives a much more objective view and can be much more fearless in its level of investigation that you can go into. So I think, and that is when you would hope that those people around who saw what had been going on are almost given permission to speak about it, actually. And in organisations, I think that people being given permission to speak is incredibly important. So having sort of policies that are out in the open and having a zero tolerance in any organisation, I think, is essential. But having that, knowing you've got external oversight, I think is a really big issue, because otherwise a whistleblower, sometimes people have come to me who tried to whistleblow and they end up in a really difficult position. Yeah, it's all about safety, and again, it goes back to fear, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Jill, can we take a step back then and look at how Jill the girl became Jill the super lawyer and the champion of,
I don't recognise that description, but I'm just doing a job. So, you know.
Which is amazing. And what struck me, and I always love coming to these Bill Fisher offices. I think they're absolutely amazing. But I remember the first time I came here, I thought, oh my gosh, I mean, this is just awesome. I could never be part of this. How do I become a lawyer like this? And I've come from Ireland. It was one of the first of my family to go to university and so forth. I thought, oh my gosh, I could never fit in here now. And now I come here quite a bit to hang out on the balcony. But what advice do you have? Because I know that you said in your own personal history that you were the first in your family to go to university. So what advice would you give to the young hopefuls here that want to, or may even consider that there might be a possibility of going into law? How did you get to be where you are?
So how did I get to be a lawyer? I mean, literally, I come from a very working class background, a family of factory workers, and fortunately had a couple of good teachers at school and who encouraged me to apply for a law degree. And in fact, I did my law degree at Liverpool University with Celestine Greenwood, who's in the room there. So hi, Celestine. I'm sorry I can't see you there personally, but and I and I think it was about, I mean, you're either a litigator or you're not. That's the first thing I would always say, actually. You kind of know when you're starting doing law. But I think it was about, I don't really care what other people think about me, or about, I don't actually care about necessarily winning a case. I mean, I want to win the case, obviously. What I really care about is being fearless for that client. And if I believe in what they are saying is true, then I will move everything to get to the conclusion for them. Because I think, having that skill of being legally qualified and understanding, I mean, I trained as a commercial litigator, which I thought was really helpful for me, because I came into the personal injury area of law with like really strong litigation skills, I suppose. And I think I think that and has enabled me to really see that law is a tool. If you know how to use it, can be hugely beneficial. So, you know, I don't know if Yasmin Waldry might be in the room as well. Yasmin and I worked on some terrorism work together, and we ran a campaign for about 12 years to put in place new law to support victims of terrorism overseas financially when they returned to the UK. We did that. It took a long time. We did it. So we never gave up. And I think it's about, and we felt passionately about it. So it's about finding your passion in law, recognizing the law as a tool, and becoming, I think, really skilled in using the law, and then applying it fearlessly. I think you absolutely can't be worried about losing a case, because I always say I'd rather fight the case and lose if I believe in the case than not fight that case. So I think being fearless, being honest to yourself, and actually what I always find quite surprising when you've got a case is you'll find some chink somewhere which actually gives you the route into it. So I always trust my own instinct on cases, you know, where things might be, and you know, that's usually pretty good. And I think just being fearless and being honest to yourself, and I don't think you can run a case if you don't really believe in it. I think that's really difficult, actually. I think, but for me, I've been really, really lucky with the cases I've had, and you know, my clients are just amazing. And the inquest I've got now is for a young boy who died actually on a scout trip, and this has been a really important case for me. So you know, you know, I can't stand bullies. I think the law is a real tool to actually really impact things for families. So I'm in their lives for a moment of time. It might only be for, I say only, it's been 5 years on this case, so it can be quite a long time, I suppose. But you know, they know that I've absolutely got them at the centre of it all. And I think any young lawyers coming into it, you've got to do what you're passionate about, what you really want to do in life, and actually dedicate yourself completely to it, and be fearless, and you know, and just go forward. And anyone's negative about things, just brush them off, because frankly, sometimes people will be negative about stuff. But as long as you believe in what you're doing, that is gold dust. You've got to keep going.
I mean, you are like lucky enough you're working for a firm like an amazing firm like Phil Fisher, one of the biggest law firms in the UK. But there are lawyers up and down the country doing this in small individual practices everywhere. Do you see, is there any particular advantage of working in somewhere as big like this, or is it all the same?
So I didn't always work at a big law firm, by the way. I mean, you know, I've been at Phil Fisher for nearly 19 years now. I worked at a different firm in London for 9 years before that. And before that, I was in Liverpool and Manchester. And they weren't big law firms at all, actually. And I came to Phil Fisher and set up the department myself. I was the only person doing the serious injury work. There were a few others doing some, but not much. But so I grew the department. So I don't really think it matters where you are. I mean, look, there are benefits of being in a big sort of corporate law firm, in that I've got the financial backing of the firm to do things in a way that a small law firm would find it very difficult. I've also built a team around me that can do it. But you can't expect to start off, you know, that way. I mean, you know, I started off as a trainee solicitor in Manchester doing primarily libel law and commercial litigation, but also doing some personal injury law work, which I really enjoyed and really liked. And I kind of followed through when I got my skills and went to different firms to try and work out, you know, what I really wanted to do and to get those skills. So I really don't think you need to be at what I suppose a big shiny law firm in the city. And that certainly isn't my roots, actually. I'm as surprised as you that I'm there. I wasn't expecting that. It wasn't a plan.
And sometimes that's what's great. You have to just go with the flow and take every opportunity you can, one at a time, which I think.
Well, I mean, I left my firm of 9 years, and my husband said to me, it's not a good idea. He cautioned me against moving, and I thought, no, I'll go anyway, I'll go. So, so I didn't listen to my husband very much, I'm afraid.
But so Jill, you talked about skills. What would you say are the transferable skills that go right through all of the trainings that you have and the experiences you have that actually really help us in the area of human rights and litigation.
So I think, you know, it's interesting. I go back to the point, there's usually something in the case that you sniff out. Sniffing out bad behaviours is a real skill. Understanding the litigation process really, really well. And I think also, you know, you've got to be interested in people, and that actually is a real skill. I only recently realised that I kind of read mainly biographies. It actually makes sense when I think about it, because I always say to my clients, your case is a book and I've got to put the chapters together. So the skill is taking your client from where they are to the end, and is less painful a way as possible, with them completely trusting you. And even when you're feeling a bit shaky about things, they can't know that, which is a skill. And really trusting your own instincts with things, actually. And if sometimes, you know, I've gone to investigate cases abroad and things like that, I think, I think there's something there, and there almost always is. So I think it's an instinctive legal skill. I always call it the psychology of litigation. Also get to know your opponent and get to understand how they're working, actually. So get to know the other lawyers who are on the team around you. And I think that is being inquisitive, using the law, and being intuitive and being brave. And I think those are kind of like not what you would call straight legal skills, but I think they're skills that really help you to become a really good lawyer, if that's the way, and like clients will want to come back to, well, hopefully not come back to me, actually, personally, he'd take this one off, but you know, they will talk about you. So I don't actually really network very much. I know people talk about networking, and I get that. I'm not a big networker. I had my son, he was 17 yesterday, so I pretty much go home every night to see him, and that's kind of it, really. But I think actually a lot of people have talked earlier about having like legal teams that you're working with. You do get to know them really well, and you know, and also you know, do some pro bono work. It can be really positive as well, because I think that exposes you to people as well in different sort of walks of legal life, I suppose. So I mean, I've done a load of pro bono work over the years, and it's really important. So those kind of things. Am I answering the question? I'm not sure I am completely.
You are, you're great. Absolutely. And that's really so helpful. I was just struck me, how do you deal with the setbacks? Because the area you're in, as you've already said, it's not so easy to get these cases, especially the civil cases of rape and sexual harassment. It's not easy to bring them. How do you deal with the setbacks?
Well, I always had this rule that if I didn't lose a hearing somewhere along the way, I was going to lose the whole case. I was always quite happy to lose a hearing as long as I won the whole case. But yeah, I mean, you have to be realistic. You can't always win everything. But there haven't been many, actually, to be fair. It's been pretty good. But I think you can spot setbacks quite early on, I think, actually. And you also have to be really clear with your clients. You can only ever give them legal advice, which then decide whether or not they're going to follow it. It's up to them. So I think a setback is not because you as a lawyer have done anything wrong. Usually it's because the facts just don't enable you to take that forward. So as long as you've done what you possibly can, you've given the correct advice, I think you shouldn't see it as a setback. I think you should see it as a learning curve, because I go back to, if you're too afraid to lose a case, then you shouldn't really be doing it, because actually you're going to lose at times, and that's quite a harsh lesson. But there's a number of other people who need your help, and you just have to carry on. And also, when the cases get tough, you know, there's inevitably a time in a case. Almost every case I've done, I thought, God, I'm absolutely exhausted. I've got all this stuff to do. And you just have to get your head down and keep going, actually, and don't give up. I've never given up on a case, actually. I always think it's really important to keep going and realise that it's almost like a litigation is a roller coaster. You're going to have ups, you're going to have downs, hopefully more ups and downs. and enjoy the ride whilst you can, and actually enable people to get access to justice. What a gift is that? That all those people in the room, I'm afraid I can't see, but many of you are going to be able to use your legal skills to give women and victims access to justice. That is fantastic. So you've already got that skill because you already sat in that room thinking in that way, which is great.
And if you're so passionate about something like this, especially the type of law which is or can be so emotional because it is so personal to the victim and to the claimant, how do you separate that then from the legal process that you have to go through?
Well, it's very difficult. I think it can be really hard, actually. And sometimes I try and work in a small team. I would normally work in a small team on my cases, and sometimes it gets very hot on these cases. So I kind of say, right, okay, I've got to litigate. You're going to have to deal with the day-to-day stuff with the client for the moment, whilst I'm concentrating on this massive application we've got going on. So, but I always try and, I suppose, personally look at the positive from it. They want to be successful. I have the means of helping them to be successful in their litigation. So I focus on the positive at all times, actually. And I always, even, the case I'm dealing with now where the young boys died, it's awful. It's hugely sad. But I'm focusing on what I can do for them in a positive way. So I don't feel, you do get emotionally attached, but not to the extent where you're too emotionally attached. And so, you just have to take that little step back because you're the lawyer in this process. And, focus on the goal at the end of it. I think that keeps your mind very focused on what you're doing, actually.
And looking back on your career and how you started out, is there anything now that you would do differently, or you would advise the girls and young women in this room to watch out for, or mistakes that you would recommend they try not to make?
Do differently. I'm trying to think, actually. I'm not sure. I do remember it was quite interesting when I was applying to universities from Liverpool University, so to firms rather. I didn't get any replies from any London firms, not a single reply. And I was like, that's a bit disappointing. Anyway, I got a great firm in Liverpool and I had a really good time there. And then I was in Manchester and then I moved down to London. I think sometimes it's about not restricting what you think you can do, actually, and just going for it a bit more. So maybe I would have moved earlier in my career, actually, and to move down to do the kind of work I'm doing now. But I think, yeah, I also think actually you really need to find sponsors in this world. So sponsorship, people talk about mentoring quite a lot, and mentoring I get, but I think having a male sponsor who is supporting you is a really valuable thing as a woman. And the he for she campaign is a big thing, I always think, actually. And men speaking up on behalf of women in a positive way is incredibly important and really valuable, because I'm afraid, like it or not, there are some men who won't listen to you in the way that they should if you're a woman, but they will listen to men. So I think sponsorship, he for she, aligning yourself with people, and sometimes I've spoken out about things and it hasn't actually really helped me because it wasn't the kind of mainstream view. Am I bothered about that? No, I'm not really, actually, if I'm honest about it. I'm quite happy to be outspoken and say what I want, even though other people might not like it, because I know it's right to say it. But I would really strongly advocate on the sponsorship side of things. I think that's a big thing.
That is so interesting. I think that goes back to some of the work that I've done on speaking up and on the bystander and trying to encourage others men to step in. Again, it makes it so much easier for women when they can't speak out for themselves.
Yeah, I think of some of the pivotal times in my career, right at the very start, and I didn't really realise it at the time, but I, at those points, actually had a male backer who actually said, no, Jill's good at litigating, give her this case. That kind of thing was going on without me truly realising it. And in fact, You know, where I am now, the managing partner, Michael Chiswick, was great at that actually. He put me in positions that enabled me to show what I could do, which is really good of him to do that. And then, you know, and then when you show you can do it, then people will vote for you and accept you're doing it, you know. But it was that I needed that level of sponsorship. I didn't really seek it out; it just happened. And I think if I'd sought that out, it might have been a bit easier for me. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important point.
And would you say that that will be your final message to girls or is there some other piece of advice, one piece of advice that you would give to the girls in this room for, starting out?
Well, I would say, I always think, you know, don't be afraid to lose, be fearless, be brave, use the law as a tool. And don't be afraid to litigate on cases if litigation is the right thing, because actually litigation gives you a lot of power in a case. You can force people to do things they don't want to do. So be really brave and use the skills you've got, because it's an amazing thing when you get a great result for a client and you get justice for them. So I would say that would be my message. Be brave and be fearless and don't care what people think. Just do what you know is the right thing to do.
Brilliant. Jill, I'm sorry, I'm just being told we're out of time. I could stay and talk to you for ages. But look,
I'm sorry, in Manchester. I'm not going to dash on the court to see if my jury's back. I don't think they are. So,
well, maybe we could have a coffee with Michael Chiswick the next time you're both in town. That would be great.
Yeah, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Thank you so much and good luck with your case today. Hope it
and
goes
thanks
well.
for having me. And I'm sorry I'm not there, everybody, but great to be involved.
You're an inspiration, Jill. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye. Bye-bye.
Well, everyone, it's time for lunch. We're slightly running over, so please do head down to the break area where you were before. Grab yourself some lunch. Please be back here. I'm not giving